Over the weekend, the state government released its response to the independent expert panel assessing impacts of coal mining in the Sydney catchment. You might remember last year, this expert group, led by the chief scientist and the chief engineer, released an incredibly dense and scientific report. It was some 700 pages and included strong calls for the better protection of water in the system. At the time, the state government decided to suspend all mining approvals under the catchment until it had a chance to review the report. And locally, that decision meant that plans for the expansion of the Dendrobium and Russellvale mines would be on hold. We heard at the time that the Dendrobium expansion was essential for the future of BlueScope as well. So on Saturday, the New South Wales Planning Minister, Rob Stokes, released a media statement that he had accepted all 50 of the recommendations from the expert panel, but he wasn't available for an interview about the decision this morning and what that means for the Illawarra. He said his team said hopefully sometime this week, so we might be able to bring that to you. Adam Searle is the New South Wales Opposition Planning spokesman. Good morning to you, Adam Searle.
Good morning, Kelly. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for your time this morning. So I guess the government initially said its response to this was delayed because of the summer bushfires and the coronavirus, and you can certainly accept the pressures on government to manage those crises. But what do you make of the decision now to adopt all 50 recommendations?
Look, New South Wales Labor welcomes that decision. For a number of years, we have shared concerns expressed in the community that mining in the water catchment hasn't had the requisite level of scientific study, scrutiny and rigour that it requires. And we know that these decisions haven't come out of thin air. This is a result of many years of community activism, but also scientific work done by the Office of the Chief Scientist. Now, we welcome the Chief Scientist's involvement in this because we believe that any planning approval should be based on science, and that includes protecting our precious water. We have, for many years, New South Wales Labor has said that protecting our water has to take the highest priority. But we also believe that a well-regulated mining industry with the highest standards of environmental protection is vital for the economic security of the state, and that is particularly so for regional economies like the Illawarra. So we welcome the decision of the government to accept the Chief Scientist's report. You're right, it is a very complicated report. I'm not a scientific expert.
I was going to say, have you consumed it? Yeah.
I have done my best to read the number of reports produced by the Chief Scientist, including the interim reports, and I've reached out to people in the scientific community to try and understand what it is saying better. In short, it does not recommend that mining cease in the water catchment, but it does call for higher levels of scrutiny and environmental protection and a greater degree of rigour when assessing mining proposals, and it is gratifying that the state government has recognised that. What it has also shown is the absence of baseline data about the impact of mining on water over a period of time. There is basically, even after these complicated studies, a lack of baseline information to really be able to assess what impact mining has had in the water catchment. So that data will now be collected, if my understanding of the government's decision is correct, in accepting the Chief Scientist's report in this regard. So that is a big step forward for not only environmental protection and people concerned about our water quality, but also for people who want to see mining prosper into the future and be put on a sound and sustainable basis going forward.
The government says they'll create an expert group to evaluate new mining applications in the catchment and a panel that should do some of that work. How should that look, or who should be on that panel?
Look, this is where it gets very, very complicated, because you need people who are water experts, geological experts, other forms of scientific expertise will be required as well. Obviously, that will be difficult finding the personnel who have the availability and the time to do this, but it is good that the government is thinking in this direction. I mean, Kelly, people shouldn't forget that, you know, we were at the forefront of calling for if you like, a moratorium on new approvals while the government got its scientific house in order on mining approvals, and belatedly they came to the party. But what we have seen through the work of the chief scientist is how government over time has really dropped the ball, hasn't really had visibility of all of the impacts of mining on the water catchment. But again, we've got to be conscious that mining is a massive employer, not just for the Illawarra, but right across the state. Its supply chains have a very profound economic impact, and particularly at the moment when we need to keep the economy ticking over, but ticking over in an environmentally sustainable way. So we need to get the right expertise onto this panel to make sure that as we assess mining approvals into the future, the proper level of scientific scrutiny is applied so that the community can have the confidence that these are sound decisions.
So given that, would you support the expansion of the Dendrobium mine under the catchment, even though Sydney Water has expressed concern about it being allowed?
Well, just let me say this. Water New South Wales and the views of other water experts are very important in this process, and they are very powerful and important voices. But that's, with respect, not the right question about whether anyone supports the expansion or opposes the expansion for that matter. The real issue is, what does the science tell us? Can the expansion be done safely and in a scientifically sound way without negatively impacting our water supply and our water quality?
And would you say at this stage we don't know the answer to that?
The answer to that is, we know part of the answer because mining has been going on for over a century in the water catchment, and in fact efforts of successive governments have improved water quality over the years. But as you spend more time doing that mining, and as the population of Sydney keeps increasing, obviously the level of risk also increases. And what is gratifying is the government has belatedly recognised this. They did put in place that moratorium. Now they've got the report of the chief scientist, and now they've indicated they're going to put in place further oversight and regulatory measures so that when future expansions are considered, they can be scientifically assessed, and the community, whatever the outcome, whether you're for or against it, the community can have confidence that this is an important fact.
The government, in the meantime, has wound back the power of the Independent Planning Commission. So this is a very complicated field when you try to unravel what a new development application or a mining application has to go through. And now we'll see specific requirements around any mining in the Sydney catchment. But I guess that does lead to further delays. So what will that mean for projects that the Illawarra economy is depending on, and for big industry like BlueScope if they're faced by further delays because of this new scrutiny?
Well, Kelly, I think everybody in the community, including those in the mining industry, would want to have public confidence in any planning decisions. You don't want to rush situations and then have widespread loss of social licence for such an important industry. So as difficult as it is important to get the process and the scientific assessment correct so that there can be sound and reliable outcomes. Because if there aren't, and the ball is dropped and things go terribly wrong, the damage to the reputation of that industry would be almost irreparable. So it's important to get this right so that the industry can be put on a sustainable and solid foundation going forward. And look, far be it from me to defend the government, but the fact is it has belatedly recognised the need for greater scrutiny in terms of our precious water supply. What is being done to date is not good enough, and we will keep the pressure up on the government to put in place the right scientific methods. In terms of the Independent Planning Commission, the recent review didn't really reduce its power. Some of the triggers for its involvement have been diluted, and that is regrettable. But nevertheless, the Planning Commission remains a very important gatekeeper in terms of assessing large projects. So what we've seen recently have been, if you like, approvals within an overarching legal approval already given, although ones where individual longwalls were subjected to greater scrutiny. And that is a big step forward from what had been the case. Again, not adequate, but a step forward. These new mechanisms, this new scientific oversight, must be put in place, and it must be put in place swiftly so that the industry can have certainty and that the community can have confidence that their water supply and, vitally, their water quality is not going to be impaired by mining activities.
All right, Adam Searle, thank you for your time this morning.
My pleasure, Kelly.
Thank you. That's Adam Searle, the Shadow Energy Minister and Planning Minister in New South Wales. And look, hopefully we will hear at some point from the New South Wales Planning Minister on this issue as well.